Okay, so next up we have Shona Turnbull taking it back to Scotland again. As you know, we'll be talking about council and partnership, a local authority perspective on marine spatial planning.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. A little bit short for the microphone. Can you all hear me okay? Shout at the back if you can. If you can hear me, that's fine. Right, well, first of all, welcome and thank you to the organisers for allowing me to present to you today. Just an overview of the sort of topics I'm going to cover. Just looking at, taking a little step back first of all, and looking at which environment are we actually talking about. A very quick flash through the interdisciplinary approach that we need to marine spatial planning, and then a look at how two Scottish councils, also known as local authorities, the terms are interchangeable, hopefully how they're advocating marine spatial planning and helping developers to see by support, enabling and engaging, and a few conclusions. So first of all, what environment are we actually talking about? Is it the physical one? Is it the seabed, the water column? Is it the ecological one, where you've got marl beds, all that sort of thing? Is it the biological one, so you've got individual species of sand eels, shearwaters, salmon, in relation to climate change, disease factors? Is it the social environment? That's something that's maybe not always looked at in such great detail, and apologies if I refer to my notes, otherwise I go off at tangent and we'll talk about all sorts of things and we'll run out of time. I think with the social element, people have very good understanding of their own patch of sea, and I think it's that visceral enjoyment that every single one of us in this room gets from just being by the sea. So I think we shouldn't ignore the social and community aspect. And then the policy environment. You probably all switch off and go to sleep. That's a really boring element, but if it wasn't for the policy element, if it wasn't for the EU directives that are covering Scotland that I'm going to be talking about, if it wasn't for the targets for renewable energy, for climate change, we wouldn't be doing all of the things that we're doing. And I would suggest that local authorities actually encompass some of these environments most of the time, but occasionally all of them. So just a quick look at the interdisciplinary approach. This morning's topic is policy and consenting. So in relation to the renewables element of marine spatial planning, I think we're all working somewhere in that iterative process, but the developers are at the heart of it. But I would suggest that local authorities actually play a vital part. And just to kind of set the context, I represent Highland Council, and as you can see, it's a huge patch. When we talk about the mainland only, we're about 50% of the mainland, and we've got some 26,000 kilometres squared, and about nearly 5,000 kilometres of coastline. But I'm doing this in partnership with Orkney, and as you can see at the same scale, they've got roughly about 1,000 kilometres of coastline in an area of about 1,000 kilometres squared. So effectively, we could fit 26 Orkneys in Highland. But don't tell them that, they'd hate that. I apologise to anybody from Orkney here today. So, to the meat of the sandwich. I think as local authorities, we're doing a number of things that support marine renewables developers. And I'm going to talk about each of these in a little bit more detail, bearing in mind that some of the things that we do will cross a number of these headings at the same time. So looking at the supporting role, obviously there's a jewel in the crown, EMEC. I'm trying to avoid acronyms, but they will crop up. But the European Marine Energy Centre, I didn't actually realise until a few months ago that it's part owned by Orkney Islands Council. So that's something that I've learnt very recently. So that's a jewel in the crown. That's clearly a support and an enabling role that they are doing, and most of you probably know quite a bit about EMEC, so I won't go into too much detail. But other activities as local authorities, we're doing something called master planning and then local detail planning activities. And this example shows how a harbour had a planning protocol developed for Scrabster to try and just bring all the different bits together to support development. It's not a harbour that the local authority actually owns. In addition, we provide more detailed, most local authorities produce something called local plans. That's our main policy guidance for the terrestrial planning side. And the marine planning side, as you know, is still in relatively infant stages, but we'll talk about more of that in a minute. So they produced this as an example of aquaculture supplementary guidance. So it's just a little bit more detailed thing that developers can go to for their sector to get some guidance on how to progress. They also, in Orkney, produced guidance for ballast water, which is a marine topic that may be of interest to some of you, and Highland Council will be developing a similar aquaculture supplementary guidance in due course. And then there are a number of kind of wider initiatives. There's the Pentland Firth and Orkney Waters Marine Energy Park, and things called enterprise areas around NIG, which isn't within the area but would be linked closely to supply chain, and the main piers and harbours at Scrabster, Haston and Linus, which takes me on to the next slide. Orkney have spent a fortune, around about, I think very roughly about 12 million, in upgrading their three main harbours at Linus, Haston and Stromness to support the marine renewables energy, but also just wider development. On a smaller scale, in Thurso, this is an example of how we're kind of trying to support the revitalisation of Thurso, and it's shaped by local people's ideas, and that's something that I'll come to in a minute. But actually, one of the main things that local authority planning officers do is work with Marine Scotland or work with other agencies within the council, determining planning applications for the onshore elements, but also we're involved in detailed discussions with developers and the associated SNH, SEPA, the people that determine some of the environmental aspects at the pre-planning stages, and hopefully try and streamline and scope out things that we feel don't need to be covered. And it might not sound much, but actually that takes a lot of officer time, and it means that we do actually look at the very detailed EIAs that come in. And for local authorities, obviously it's quite a new thing, but my particular passion is Benthos, so I do tend to go straight to those chapters and have a good look. And because we have a biodiversity duty, but terrestrial planners will say, what are you looking at that for? But actually, it's partly for my own personal interest, but to make sure that, you know, our coastal interests, where the two policy regimes overlap, are involved. In addition, other enabling roles, Orkney Islands Council have made some land purchases, and both local authorities have provided property and financial support to the emerging food supply chain. And then, as some of you may know, myself from Highland Council and colleague James Green in Orkney Islands Council, we're helping Marine Scotland, Tracy McCollin, to produce a Pentland Firth and Orkney Waters Marine Spatial Plan. Apologies for the acronym, I did try to avoid them, but getting Pentland Firth and Orkney Waters Marine Spatial Plan in a heading doesn't work. And I thought if people only see the slides afterwards, well, they can work it out from the thing underneath. This example here, actually it's quite unique. It's policy, it's boring, but it's a planning in issues and options. It's actually a consultation paper, and they've been used in terrestrial planning for quite a long time. It's a very standard process, but we're actually taking and adapting where it's appropriate terrestrial planning activities and applying them to marine planning. And the reason that we're doing this, there will be 11 Scottish marine regions, of which we will have 3 in Highland, which is massive, and the 1 in Orkney. So we're kind of piloting the whole process to see how it fits with the new legislation and how it fits in with the National Marine Plan. Slides that you saw earlier from David and Ian, they showed a lot of the processes. We'll be following something similar, but because the 11 marine regions don't really exist yet, we haven't got the plans, we will be very much under the microscope, and I thought, you're scientists, you like to show up the microscope. Now, it sounds daft, but just talk to people. A lot of the activities that I've just discussed require a significant amount of community engagement. And that's where the public are reasonably comfortable with what a local authority does. So when they come along to an event, they have a reasonable expectation of what we can do and what we can't. So when we try and transfer that to marine planning, they come along, and yes, sometimes the expectations might be slightly unrealistic, but we do try and manage that. So we've had lots of information days, workshops, drop-in sessions. And in addition to that, we're trying to develop another acronym, CPD, Continued Professional Development. So the photograph on the bottom left there shows some lovely planning officers from around the Highlands and Islands. We were on various site visits related to aquaculture, but obviously we couldn't ignore the renewables energy device behind us, so we stopped and had a mosey at that. In addition, I've developed some in-house training so that our local terrestrial planners, they got no idea about the water. Sorry, this has been recorded. They have an understanding of how the water works, but hopefully it's a slightly better understanding how we integrate the terrestrial planning down to low water springs and our marine planning, which is up to mean high water springs, and how the two can tie together. Now we can hopefully then get our plans to integrate, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a second. This is a simple schematic of how some of our processes work. In 2012, Highland Council did what was called a call for sites, and it focused exclusively on suggestions for sites that people had, little bits of land that they might have that they want to put forward for development uses to actually support marine renewable developments. And then added to the master planning that we did earlier, we then went to wider consultation, and they used maybe not the most favourite user-friendly language, but they went out to consultation, and then they're drafting the local plan based on that information. And obviously, as I mentioned earlier, we're doing the Pentland Firth plan, and then the Caithness and Southern local plan, so they're going to rebut each other, and the chaps that are developing it sit about, half a dozen feet away from me, so hopefully the two will actually marry up, and we'll try and have that integration that we're required to do by law. Now, just kind of stepping back a little bit, the policy is all one thing, but what's the actual practice? The quote on the right-hand side is from the Energy Policy Journal, and it says we've got to move away from that homogenised view of public opinion. And apologies, the slide on the right-hand side, it's not terribly clear because it's from an acetate, but someone actually said, we're not one thing, we are all things. And I think that's a message that we can take from any public engagement activity, and I think it echoes some of the comments that were made earlier. So that kind of concludes the three main themes. I'm just going to spend a moment or two talking about where do we go from here. Hopefully now you have a little knowledge on what local authorities do and what they don't, and how we kind of fit into the whole renewables process. If you haven't already, if you want to sign up to be a stakeholder in the Pentland Firth Marine Spatial Plan process, it's not terribly onerous. You get maybe a side of A4 email update every few months, and then every few months you might get a huge, great big 500-page document, but obviously you just do a keyword search for the thing that you're interested in. But if you're not already and you want to be, then more than happy if you sign up. And finally, come and talk to us, phone us, email us. I deliberately put it in that order. People, it's all too easy just to fire off an email. It's nice and interpersonal, but it's not the best way. Phone us, but obviously come and talk to us. Today and the next few days are a brilliant opportunity for everybody to talk to each other and kind of sort out issues that they might have, or glean bits of knowledge and that might, save you hours and hours. Because obviously we haven't got all the answers in developing the plan. We've got experts that we can draw on, and hopefully now I've got a whole room full of more experts that I can draw on. So in summary, I think Highland Council and Orkney Islands Council are playing a role in supporting marine spatial planning in Scotland, made significant investment in harbour upgrades and land provision, enabling development and economic growth. And by engaging with a wide range of stakeholders, I think we are a fairly key link between the developers, the academics, Scottish Government agencies, and the local people that we serve. Just a couple of acknowledgement references. And finally, you've got to end on a pretty picture, but actually, hopefully over the next few days, you can work out how do we fit all of this marine spatial planning stuff together. Thank you. There's 45 seconds for questions, but I think as we're running over a bit, I'll miss that.
Yeah, I think we don't really have much time for questions in the programme, but I think the code numbers next to the names refer to the posters, associated posters, is that correct? are we? No. Number of the paper. But I think the presenters will be wandering around afterwards with coffee, and some of them do have posters, so good opportunity to speak directly with them.